Hey, and welcome to the first ever faNDom After 93 show slash podcast, whatever you want to call us. It's just a show about Notre Dame football. I'm here with Matt Skinner and Andy Cassady. What's going on, boys?
Yo,
Not
what's up,
much.
man?
Thanks for having me.
Oh, no problem. Yeah, we're just a bunch of Notre Dame fans looking to talk some Notre Dame football and other things revolving around college football. And yeah, that's what this thing's about. I hope you enjoy our show. If you do, please subscribe and like the video on YouTube. Or if you're listening on podcast, please give us a review or just follow us and listen. That's all we can ask for. But yeah, we'll start off by introducing ourselves and how we became Notre Dame fans. Andy, if you'd like to go first, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Brett. So, lifelong Irish fan. Didn't go to school there. I grew up. My dad's dad was a Notre Dame grad way back in the day. So, my dad kind of grew up drinking the Kool-Aid. Um, he didn't end up going there. Went to Miami U, but still retained his Irish fandom. And kind of same thing happened to me. Grew up drinking the Kool-Aid, watching Irish football with my dad every Saturday, and was a lifelong hopeful. Wasn't smart enough to get in, but had the good fortune of going to a school in St. Louis U that didn't have a football team of its own. So I felt like I could legitimately continue to root for the Irish without cheating on my home school. So and ended up actually meeting my wife at St. Louis, who kind of had a similar story. Grew up with a bunch of family who went to Notre Dame, but she didn't end up going there herself. But um, we kind of bonded over Irish football and been a part of my uh, Saturday fall routine for as long as I can remember, and um, still try to make it up to a few games a year when I can. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
That's what's up. It's a disease you can't get rid of, it seems like.
No, no,
Follow,
it's
you're
not.
stuck.
It's not. Sometimes I wish I didn't love him as much as I do,
Right.
but
Yeah, it's like a
Yeah,
bad girlfriend.
yeah.
yeah.
Oh, how about you, Skinner?
Oh, that disease goes back even further. I think. Let's see. The first memory I have is of the Notre Dame Florida State game. The last time before this year that we knocked off the number one team. I wasn't allowed into the game. We back then my dad hadn't have alumni status, so we had to wait in line to get tickets, and it was
You
too
were
cold. My
what,
mom
5 years
said
old?
I was 5 years old. Yeah, my
Yeah.
mom made me go back to the motorhome. And yeah, we watched the game there, and then the next week, Boston College kicked us into the ninth circle of hell, and we've been there since, and hence the title of the podcast.
Do you think we're
But
a curse because we were born in '88?
I thought this was the year, man, because the Dodgers, Liverpool, like this is the year. It wasn't to be. Clemson and Bama made sure of that.
Yeah.
But no, I also similar story to Andy. Just my dad went there for a couple years, didn't graduate, but my sister who went there and met her husband in the '90s got him alumni status. But just goes back to I think my grandfather had a scrapbook that I actually have back in the '20s and '30s, and just you know, Subway alumni Catholic family following the Catholic school. And similar to Andy, I went to I tried. I actually got denied 3 times, but I ended up at Cincinnati. But I do betray my alma mater occasionally when they play each other in basketball, and next year for football. But still love the Bearcats too. And sometimes I think I've really questioned how much I'm going to let this team ruin my psyche in these
Right.
Saturdays in the fall. So
It's a detriment, I'll tell you.
I've lost years of my life.
Yeah. Well, I'm bald now, so kind of imagine
You
what
just
it
blame
feels
Notre
like.
Dame on that, right?
That's what I say. Yeah, that and ex-girlfriend Kaylee. That's what I say.
Yeah, that's right. But yeah, that's about it.
Well, for me, I grew up an Ohio State fan because my whole
Oh,
family's, yeah, I know. My whole family's Ohio State fans.
We all make mistakes. It's
Yeah,
okay.
but I am an Irish Catholic. And then my mom, she always liked Notre Dame. My dad, I don't. She's a nurse, and she had this patient one day, and he offered her tickets to a Notre Dame Navy game, and I can't remember what year it was, but Julius Jones was there still. It was Tyrone Willingham years. Wasn't they
You
weren't
went
there
with
yet.
me, didn't you?
No, I went. It was me and my dad that went to that game. That was my first time ever there,
Okay.
and I want to say I was like 13 or 14. But went to the game, toured the campus, all that, and I fell in love with the place and came back. And I wouldn't say they were my number one team at the time, but when I got back and I bought one of the shirts, the student section shirts,
Yeah.
and I wore it to school, and I got so much hate. For some reason, the hate I got made me love them even more. So that was a big reason why I became a fan. I started watching them all the time, and I don't know, they just fit who I was. And yeah, that's just what happened with me. And I've gone to games with Skinner. We went every year for what, like 4 years straight,
Couple
4 or 5 years
years.
straight. Yeah, and yeah, now I'm a diehard.
You said that was Ty Willingham, right?
Yeah.
So it was 2003 then. That was the only time that he played
Yeah,
Navy
so
at home. Yeah,
so I
I
was
just
probably
looked it up.
15 then, 14
Yeah.
or 15. Yeah. So, but yeah, that's how I became a fan, and now I, watch them all the time. And what sucks is I want them to be better than Ohio State. That's all I want, just so I can not have to listen to all the people here in Columbus all the time, and I can shove it down their throat sometime. But they're on top of the world right now, so hopefully Notre Dame can get there.
Well, we're gonna get our chances in a couple of years. What 2022 and 2023, we got a home and home with them, and we have a home and home with them and Clemson both those years. So we got
Oh God,
we got about 18 months to get a lot better in a hurry.
right. And all I ask is at least win one. Win
Yeah.
one of those, and I'll be all right.
I always wanted us to, as we'll see if this podcast is successful and continues, that I will be the history nerd because I just love all things history, and that's when Notre Dame was better, was in the past. But I always wanted us to be better in a record than every team. Like right now, we have like an 8-3 record now against Bama or whatever, and Texas, Oklahoma. But Ohio State, I've seen all 4 losses to them. They're 2-4 against them,
I
and
think we're 2-3 against them, aren't we?
no, because we played in 15
Oh, that's
and
right.
05,
That's
and
right.
then the home and home in the 90s. So I always was like, how many more games do we have to play to break with all these teams? Oregon State and
Yeah, God, of all the teams, man.
0-2, UConn. Oh,
Don't get me started.
Oh,
on
that UConn game. That UConn year though was just the
they were
last
6-6.
Syracuse that year too.
What's
that
that?
year was so brutal.
I think they lost to Syracuse that year too, didn't they?
They did. They lost every game. They were 6-6. It was Weiss's last year, but every one of them was, I think, a touchdown or less. So, yeah. Not
Yeah,
that they were close to being undefeated.
Yeah, it doesn't help you sleep any better when you're getting snowballs pelted at you from your own student section.
To a team that just fired their coach.
Yeah.
Oh, God. All right, well, let's move on here to the big news of, the week pretty much that just came out last night, the Marcus Freeman hire. Skinner, I think you should touch on this. You knew probably more about him than any of us do.
I don't know. Like maybe Andy actually knows a little bit more because this year I wasn't following the Bearcats as closely. I did watch several of the games because they had such a solid season. But it wasn't until the game against Tulsa that I started picking up the story between Freeman and Fickle, the head coach of UC. Because Fickle coached him at Ohio State when he was a player. I think he was the secondary. I don't know if he's safety or corner, but they've been close ever since. I guess even their 12 combined kids were all in like the same house for a while down in Cincy. But
I saw that.
so,
I saw that story.
But yeah, other than that, and also seeing how stellar Cincy's defense is, I don't have a whole lot of info on them. I'm just excited for Notre Dame and hopeful that Cincinnati can find somebody half as good as him to replace him. I don't know if you know more about that than I do, Andy.
Yeah, he's a stud. I know that all my UC friends around here are real bummed about it. It was funny because earlier in the week, it seemed like – so flashback to like a month ago, it seemed like he was starting to get on everybody's radar for schools that were going to have D coordinator openings. And I know I'm sure you guys listen to some of the other Irish podcasts. I'm a big Shamrock fan, and Pete Sampson and Fortuna were talking about about him a while back, but then, it kind of didn't hear about Notre Dame pursuing anybody. And then earlier this week, it seemed like Freeman was talking with LSU and in serious talks. And one of my UC buddies said, sounds like he's going to LSU. And I had said to him, this was 3 days ago, yeah, that's a bummer, because I know it seemed like he was high on a lot of ND insiders lists. And then that news kind of last night came out of nowhere. So obviously we weren't privy to the fact that he'd been talking with them, but huge move by Notre Dame. I as a UC fan and UC Cincinnati resident, feel bad for the Bearcats. They keep losing their coaches to Notre Dame, and I can tell you, it's hard to imagine a fan base that hates Notre Dame right now as much as Cincinnati does, which makes it tough as a UC fan, and a lot of friends who are UC fans. But a huge move that we were able to outduel, so to speak, LSU. I obviously not privy to what we paid him, but I know the numbers that were being floated out for him by LSU were huge. So just a big move by Notre Dame. Young guy, he seems like he's got a great relationship with his players. I obviously love Clark Lee, and I'm going to miss him. But I think Freeman might, having a young guy, kind of an up-and-comer, who may be able to build better relationships with the players. And it sounds like, by all accounts, he's an elite recruiter too. So I absolutely love the move. Was pleasantly surprised because, like I said, I hadn't heard that he was talking with Notre Dame. So great move and a lot to be excited about there.
Last night before I went into work, I looked on Facebook and there were one foot down. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of them.
Yeah.
They're kind of a smaller, Notre Dame board, but they said that, Freeman to LSU was pretty much a done deal. And that was probably at 3:00 yesterday, Eastern time. And then, I'm at work and I look down and check my phone and it's 8:00 and I'm like, what the hell? He signed with Notre Dame. Pretty big shock. I think I saw he got 2.5 mil a year for 4 years. I'm kind of surprised not surprised, but I heard a lot that he was a head coaching candidate for a group of 5 position. He took the job with us, which I feel like this is something we've lacked for a long time, is getting the big name coaches. We've always promoted from within. I feel like we've kind of let our coordinators go, Elko to Texas A&M. I feel like in Alford to Ohio State, the running backs coach. But this is big, and this hopefully is the next step for us to take to get to that level. He also plays from what I've
We've had a
seen.
couple decent ones for sure, but I mean that's a larger discussion maybe we could have later in the show about just the nature of the whole sport of college football right now and what the real difference is between those top now 3 teams and everyone else in both talent, but also I didn't realize till you said that they paid him what 2 point something million. Yeah. I don't know if that's normal for Notre Dame's coordinators. I'm not privy to their salaries that they're making. But I know that was one of the gripes that you'd see on a lot of the boards over the last couple decades is Notre Dame was unwilling to play the big money football, which I can understand on some level that, not wanting to sell yourself out just to keep pace with the schools that are selling their soul for the sport and this and that. And that's a whole another topic. But at some point, if you're not going to pay people enough, you are going to have to promote from within, and it's always going to be an uphill battle. It's always going to be more difficult. Yeah. So,
well, I mean,
Bob Diaco was another one. What's that?
Yeah, I'm just saying it's a good thing. I'm glad to see it.
Yeah.
Glad to see it. And then other big news: Jack Coan transferring from Wisconsin to Notre Dame, and I want to throw a little something out on this first. I'll get into this later too with Ian Book, but I think Jack Coan is a very good fit for this offense. Do I think he's going to take us to the national championship? No, but I think he is the right kind of quarterback. He has a pretty good arm. He's a game manager, but he looks comfortable throwing the ball, and I think that's something we've kind of lacked the past few years. But I hope he comes in, and I don't think we're going to be challenging for a playoff spot this year, but I think he's going to be a very good bridge quarterback for when Tyler Bucknell starts in 2 years. That's my take on it.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think that's the perfect way to describe him as a bridge quarterback. I think this upcoming year is going to have to be about getting ready for the year that follows in terms of playing Ohio State and Clemson. I don't think with the firepower we lost on the offensive side of the ball that we're a realistic contender next year. But if we can use him to get the younger quarterbacks behind him ready and to get our offense clicking, I mean, he's going to have the benefit of a lot, though, that Ian Book did not have. I mean, and Ian Book could probably be the subject of his own podcast. I've been fighting with fellow Notre Dame fans for the last 4 years about Ian Book, and I've been a huge Book supporter and apologist. And I think he did not. I mean, not only do I think, it's a fact that he did not have the benefit that some of these other elite. I'm not, he's not Justin Fields or Trevor Lawrence but you put him on Alabama with the weapons he has, and I think Book is criminally underappreciated by Irish fans. But if you can my point is Jack Coan may have a hell of a lot better receiving core if Kevin Austin's healthy. Who's a stud freshman, Jordan Johnson, I think.
Yeah.
Mike Mayer's going to be a sophomore. He's going to have another year under his belt. He's going to have more weapons on the outside than Ian Book did.
Skinner?
I mean, I've said this to you both, I think, before. I don't know where I weigh on the Book, because I've gone way to both ends of the spectrum this season. But
we'll get to that later.
Yeah, but no,
I've got some opinions on it. Don't worry about that.
No, I've told you both before. I think that we've just been, and this is again more to the fact that other schools don't have this problem of it's like feast or famine, but not at the same time with regards to talent. We'll have amazing linebackers, but no secondary. We'll have an overall amazing defense, but the offense stutters, or you have a new quarterback and they're trying to run too much, or you'll have Jimmy Clausen or Brady Quinn with 5 like amazing receivers, but not an ability to stop the other team. And that's, I think, one of the things that Book really needed, and hopefully a new coach can also bring in a little bit of insight into how to help the quarterback make some of the receivers better on the field. I don't know.
I think it would help him too if going to the NFL, him not having the weight of the world on his shoulders. I feel like he put too much pressure on himself sometimes too. At least that's what it looked like to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, and again, maybe getting a little off topic, but just probably a subject for its own podcast. But and I know we're going to talk about the Bama game later in the day. But any of these elite teams, we just don't have guys that can fly past people downfield. I mean, I don't.
Yeah.
Our number 2 receiver is a grad transfer from Northwestern. Javon McKinley had some great plays, but the dude also looks like a refrigerator in terms of how fast he runs.
Someone on a broadcast said that we had 4 tight ends lining up.
Right. And so
that's what
you have to in today's game have the ability to score quickly and to have explosive plays. And we don't. Kyron Williams has had some explosive plays for us, but I mean, when was the last time this entire year that we threw a deep ball downfield to a guy who was streaking? Avery Davis against Clemson.
Yeah, that was
the only time, pretty much. Yeah,
that was because of a busted coverage, frankly. Like, when else were we throwing to a guy that was just like streaking past people? And I don't.
Did that not feel a little bit like 2012 too, where like we didn't we didn't go vertical a lot. And the one play that you can remember was the biggest regular season game, Oklahoma,
Chris Brown.
and they found Chris Brown.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. Like, why can't we have that Brady Quinn, Jimmy Clausen offense on the same year that like we're pretty deep on defense?
Honestly, we had it in 15 with Kaiser and Will Fuller. That team
who were backups at the beginning of the season.
Which is insane.
Well, not Fuller, but the running back and the quarterback were backups.
That team was. Who was our other loss that year besides Stanford at the end?
Clemson by 2 in the Hurricane.
Oh, that's right. But that was an elite. I mean, that was an elite team.
That was their coming out year. That was when Dabo became somebody.
Yeah, I mean, Deshaun Watson was a generational quarterback, and we lost to him at short of a 2-point conversion in a hurricane. So
that 2-point call, by the way.
So,
yeah. Well, they missed an extra point. That's the only reason they had to do that.
I think Jack Coan will be a good gap. He definitely has from what I've read and a little bit of highlights I've watched. He can throw the ball more vertically than Book can, and hopefully he'll have the receiving core to allow him to do that.
Yeah, I mean, he was good. Wisconsin went to the Rose Bowl with him and almost beat Ohio State in the Big Ten championship. He knows what he's doing. So we'll go on to players declaring for the draft. We knew Book would. I think the surprise for me was Tommy Tremble declaring. I didn't expect it.
It shocked me. I didn't even.
Yeah, but Tremble declaring, like, is he gonna get drafted? I don't know.
So once you put that up there, I was just doing a little research on his stats and find a couple articles too, and I guess he got a positive, one of the review. I can't think of the word, but he got evaluated. He had a positive evaluation, and that's. I think they also changed some of the rules because of the pandemic. Not that he couldn't have, right? Because he's a third year. But I was surprised. I was looking at his stats. He didn't even have a touchdown this year. But the guy is an all-around tight end. He can block.
Player, but one more year developing his receiving, I think, will improve his draft stock immensely.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't even know, honestly, that the NFL was on the radar for him. I think I saw that he left 3 years of eligibility on the table by going pro. Disappointing, but I think that we're supposed to have a stud, not surprisingly, another stud tight end coming in. So Tremble was a hell of a run blocker.
Right, and he loved it.
And he loved it. So it's going to hurt.
I mean, he complimented Michael Mayer so well, and I think that was an underutilized thing for the offense this year. I think Tommy Rees did well play calling most of the time, but I don't know why they didn't it doesn't matter if it was predictable, just line up 2 tight end as often as is healthy for them to do, and just do a bunch of play action or read options. I don't know. I felt that they were both underutilized.
Andy said, though, is we just didn't have anyone to stretch the field. So if you can't stretch the field,
just load the box. Yeah.
People are going to play within 20 yards the whole time and just condenses everything. Makes it hard.
Yeah.
But the one I do want to point out is Owusu Koramoah.
That hurts.
I was thinking about this the other day. Well, I knew he was going to leave, but
sure. I mean, yeah.
Is he the best? Who's better at linebacker in the past 20 years, him or Manti? I was thinking about this the other night. Like, they're both really good.
Where did Manti get drafted?
The Chargers, right?
Yeah, but I mean, do you remember what pick that was?
He was a second or third rounder, I want to say.
Okay, yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see because I think Woo's predicted to go like 8th overall.
Yeah.
It's hard. I mean, I love Woo. It's hard for me to compare anybody to Teo. I mean, that year he had in 12,
Teo was 38. Yeah.
I mean, the amount of huge plays that guy had that year, you can't even quantify. I mean, I'm not going to judge them on their respective NFL talent, but if I had to pick between the two, I'd take Teo any day of the week.
Yeah, for what they meant to Notre Dame and to the team while they were there, I'd probably pick Teo too. But Woo's play against Clemson on that pitch,
unreal.
Yeah, man, that was probably the most excited I've been on a play in a few years. When he did that, I was like, oh,
Yeah.
because I saw it developing when the play was going on. I saw him come off the edge, and at first I was like, he's gonna kill it. He is gonna destroy this guy, and then the ball ended up in his hands. That
That was
shit,
more ETN's mistake than it was.
right? Well, he knew he
Yeah.
was gonna get killed. Like, I don't blame him.
Yeah.
He knew he was about to die, and then man, that's just one of those plays that you can't. I feel like you can't really coach. That's just
Yeah, instinct.
player, man. Yeah.
Hey, don't forget on that list of short list of the last decade linebackers, Jalen Smith. I think.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
And unfortunately, not to try to throw like blame directly, but that was a dirty play on Ohio State's part, and that hurt him. I don't know if he's still playing or if he's still.
Yeah, he is.
just signed
Yeah,
a-
he's a
Okay.
stud. Yeah,
Yeah,
he's
with
a
the
stud.
Cowboys, he's their best
Good.
player.
I'm glad he came back because yeah.
Yeah. Anyone else declaring that you guys want to talk about? I mean, I could bring up Eichenberg. He was really good. And that's going to be a loss, and Aaron Banks too. But
I mean, our entire O line except for Patterson is gone. So
Even the center who broke his foot.
no, that's Patterson. He's back.
That is Patterson. Oh.
Yeah, so he'll be the anchor of that O line. I mean, obviously the good news is if there's one thing we recruit well beyond tight ends, it's O linemen. So I don't know anything about who's next in line in any of the other four spots, but
I've heard that they might put Corell at center and move Patterson to guard. That's what
Okay.
they were talking about. So, well, I mean, we're so far out. Who knows? That might change.
So that's another, even not the offense defense I was talking about earlier, but even within one side, like you got Williams, who's just, you're talking about instinct for running back, and he's going to lose the greatest asset a running back has in his O line experience. I mean, I think you guys are right. We recruit well, develop the talent well, but it's still going to be a learning curve for some of these guys that starts under their belt. I just, is Williams going to stick around 2 years to be able to really utilize that?
I think you got Tyree, and I think you saw towards the end of the year that Tyree was starting to come on.
He's good, but like it's that X factor. I mean, to me, Williams is one of the few 5-stars that we get. I know he probably wasn't a 5-star out of high school,
3-star,
but to me, he was a 3-star. Wow.
Yeah.
Because the way he makes those moves and just has vision, even the times when he was just going to get rocked in the backfield, he made the most of it in a way that's just it's a little bit different than the next best guy, but that little bit is the difference maker on offense.
Yeah.
It would get you those extra 3 yards. It'd get you the first down, and it was his passion. You saw him on the Clemson game on the
1,000,000%.
sideline, like
he's just got swag. I mean, there's something different about him. I totally agree with you, Skinner. So let's hope he sticks around. But yeah, he's gonna have his work cut out for him with a brand new O line. I think our first few games next year, luckily, I don't think are anything to write home about. So hopefully give them a chance to warm up before we go play Wisconsin, and then what will likely be a top 10 UC team, which is hard to believe coming into South Bend.
They'll probably be favorite.
Side note on that, are they? So I was a little sad that they had to, do the whole pandemic conference only thing, which to me was only about money for all the power conferences. But obviously that meant no Wisconsin at Lambeau this year, but they're going to do it at Soldier Field next year. You think they're going to try to make up? Because I'm sure Wisconsin isn't happy about that. It's essentially the home game for Notre Dame. I wonder if they're going to try to make up that Lambeau game, because that was the one I was looking at to maybe doing it as an away game. I don't know.
That would probably, but what kills me is they schedule these games, like 7-8 years in advance. And then you saw this year with BYU Coastal, they played a game within a week. Like
within a couple days.
Yeah. Right? So I don't know. Hopefully, I'd love to see them play at Lambeau against Wisconsin. That was
for sure.
Like I said to somebody, even though Wisconsin turned out not to be that good this year, that's one of those games you want to watch, at Lambeau against Wisconsin. Like that's a hell of a good game,
Yeah.
So yeah,
absolutely.
I would like to see them do that as part of what do they call it? The Leprechaun series or whatever it's called.
The
Shamrock
the Shamrock series. I don't think that's what it was. It was because it was a home and home. They kind of put that on hiatus, and I don't know. I kind of I know a lot of people, especially people who the types on the blogs who hate Kelly, hate Swarbrick type. They're like, what? The traditionalists, I guess you could call them, are hating on the one-off game and all the jerseys. I kind of liked some of those.
Yeah, I do too. They're modernizing us,
and it gets the kids excited. And hell, like half the time, I mean, some of them were dumb, but like some of them looked sick. I thought that was badass.
I'm with you. Some of it, like, I don't want to see them do it every game, like Oregon.
No, of course not.
Ridiculous to me.
We're not Oregon, yeah.
Yeah, but
we opened with Florida.
I don't care.
We opened with Florida State, by the way, which I know they were a train wreck and a dumpster fire the last couple of years, but they got talent. And if they find it, I think that Memphis coach will eventually get his shit together, and they'll. It's always tough to start with a team like that. That's a dangerous game. So I wouldn't look past after them. Yeah, sure, Toledo.
Yeah, fair
Purdue.
enough. Yeah.
I'm just looking down the schedule. Who else
started playing well for them too? So.
Yeah, got Virginia Tech at Virginia Tech.
Maybe we'll just bring Dabo to the game and have him scream at him on the sidelines the whole time and tell them they're scumbags.
Hey, quick question on that. I know we're way off topic, but like, whenever Saban's done, like Dabo's going to Bama, right? You guys think?
I don't know.
He played there. He won a national title there.
Yeah, but he's like
he's a god at Clemson. I get that.
At Clemson, yeah. I don't know.
I don't know. That would shock me. I didn't even know Dabo went to Alabama. That's the first I'm hearing of that.
92. Yeah, he played on the
didn't know
championship.
That. That would shock me nonetheless, though. I mean, Clemson is equal to Alabama right now, so that it's not like a step up in my mind.
But that's the thing that gives me hope. And that's hopefully whenever we get into a broader college football discussion, we can talk about that. That like Clemson was not this team. They were a good ACC team in the 2000s, in the early 2010s. But they were the fact that they are in that 3-team upper echelon, making it unfair to the rest of the sport type team is not a given. And so that's the one small silver lining I take out of their history is they had the right guy, the right situations at the right time. Maybe we can find that.
Yeah, I don't know. Let's move on to transfers.
Yeah.
I don't know how much you guys want to talk about this. Just I know a lot of people have been. I wouldn't say a lot have left. What 5 or 6 players? What I know of. Oh yeah,
Griffith.
Players declaring for the draft. I want to throw one in there. Ogundeji. He was really good.
Oh, is he gone? Damn.
Yeah, I think he deserves some credit. He really stepped up this year and played well for Notre Dame. But on to the transfers. I don't know. I saw one. The one that really stuck out to me was I think it was Houston Griffith, cornerback. He was up to possibly start next year, and he transferred. But yeah, people think it might be a culture issue or something like that. I personally don't know. I think it's one of those things now with the new rules of the NCAA that if you can transfer pretty much easy, which I'm okay with. I think it's good for the players that they can transfer and go play if they want.
Which one is this? Who is this?
Houston Griffith, cornerback. I think that's
yeah.
But I'm more on the subject of just the transferring in general. Is just I don't mind it. If these kids want to go play and think that they don't have a shot at the school or they don't fit in, then I'm all for that.
Well, especially because coaches can do it. There's no rules on the coaches, and coaches have ruined programs. I think that's a reason, Andy, that Cincinnati fans take it out on Notre Dame so much is the way in which Kelly was allowed to do what he did.
Yeah, no doubt.
And players can't do that. I mean, this is again even a whole nother topic of like paying players, but like this is at least a first step in making it more fair. Is sure, let them go, let them play. Yeah, I agree with you, Brett.
Yeah, I don't know. I'd be interested to see like what the average, number of guys that transfer from any given team in any given year is, because it did seem off the cuff to me, and maybe it was just because I was paying more attention at, immediately after the season ended. It did seem like we had an abnormal number of guys. I think it was like 6 or 7, including Griffith, Jack Lehman, Isaiah Rutherford. Those were names that I feel like we've been reading about for a long time. I know they didn't get a lot of minutes this year, but seemed like pretty high name guys. And they, along with a host of others, left. And to your point, Brett, I mean, the culture thing is the first thing that goes to my mind. Is this indicative of something bad that's going on in-house. So I would be interested to know how that number of players leaving compares with what's happening at any other school. And maybe it's not significant. Maybe that's just what's happening everywhere else. But
Yeah, I
I
think
would
you
be
got to
curious.
take in consideration Clark Lee taking the job at Vanderbilt too. That some of these guys probably felt connected to him more than they did the school itself.
Well, and
Maybe
I don't know.
that had something to do with it.
I just to pull up a little research before this started. I was just pulling up an article about the transfers and NBC Sports, and they're saying like quote for obvious reasons there were fewer transfers this past off season. So I think there were less. I don't know what less means, but if in the article they're listing, I think 6 guys. So I wouldn't get too worried about it. And I can guess that Jafar Armstrong,
Yeah,
hate
I
to
saw that.
lose him, but like he's fourth on the depth chart. He's got another year of eligibility. Like things like that are probably not surprising.
And with
to me.
him, I don't want to sound like a jerk, but he did it to himself. He just didn't progress. And now I guess you could say that's on coaching or whatever, but it's not the coach's jobs to play someone if they're a senior. Like obviously Kyron Williams, if you've watched Notre Dame the past few years, is better than Jafar Armstrong. So yeah, go play elsewhere.
Which is shocking to me because when the 2018 season opened
Yep.
and
He was the
Dexter was out,
workhorse.
he was the work. Not only he was producing on the field, but I very vividly remember Brian Kelly in some press conference saying that he, being Jafar, had the most like endurance of any football player Kelly had ever seen. So it's surprising to me now that 3 years later this is where we are. I mean, last year I liked Tony Jones Jr. a lot, but you talk about a refrigerator. I mean, Jafar, and I kept saying all last year, I kept asking why Jafar wasn't playing more.
Well, didn't he have a history of like hamstring injuries?
I
Maybe
think
those
at one
caught up
point in
to
the
him.
year he did. Yeah.
I'm just gonna miss my brother-in-law. I think you met him, Brett. And Andy, you might have met him that one time too. He lives just like a half hour away. My sister and brother-in-law, the Notre Dame alumni, and guys just got wit with these one-liners. And every time Jafar did something, it was some Aladdin joke that I would get. And I think I'm always gonna I'm gonna miss the all the cosmic powers of the universe can't stop him jokes from my brother.
That's pretty good. All right, well, I guess we'll move on to the Alabama game. I know it kind of sucked to talk about it, but I think we should.
Yeah.
Either of you guys can start. I don't care. How do you think we played? Who played well and who played bad?
I don't know. I think so much to say. I came off. I was immediately depressed because of I don't know if you were the same, Andy, but coming off the Cincinnati game, I already like didn't care, and it was weird because like I had been psyching myself out trying to get back into it despite the Clemson game in the title ACC title. That there's a shot that Alabama isn't world beaters. That Florida and Ole Miss kept pace with them. Yada yada yada. But that was slowly diminishing as the week went along, not because of the 19.5-point line, but just other factors. And then, but the Cincinnati game just made me not care about football. And then I had to go straight into another game. So by the time it was
torture, dude.
Oh, it was just like, I didn't even yell at the TV. It was 14-0. I'm like, of course. I ended up saying if they get down 3 touchdowns, I won't watch, but I ended up watching the whole game. I think they obviously got behind quick, and most people, even the announcers, it's more or less over. But they didn't give up. They didn't tank the way 2012 did. They tried to make it respectable. And then when you try to look at the stats, although again, how much was Alabama trying? They kept them under certain points and yards that they hadn't been held for so long. And you could make an argument that Notre Dame throughout the season has been like the defense kind of reacts. Look at the North Carolina game after one quarter and then coming back and readjusting.
And that was the same with Clemson in the second quarter. Is that a issue? Was that a Clark Lee issue though?
I don't know.
Game planning, because I feel like in big games we always fall behind big, and then we're playing catch up.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just want to throw that in there.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think we did the exact thing that we couldn't afford to do, and that was go down big early. I mean, it's we all as Notre Dame fans have been listening to this narrative, which was like the hot word at the end of the year, and even after we beat Clemson the first time without Lawrence, we in all of these big games that we've gotten quote unquote killed, it's been one quarter that has made the difference. I mean, we say what you will about the final score. We held Alabama to the lowest amount of points they've been held in 2 years, and outside of the first quarter, we played with them the whole game. Same thing for Clemson back in 2018. We were tied at the end of the first. Julian Love went out in the second, and we got blown out in the second quarter. Played with them the third and the fourth quarter. You just cannot. The problem with a team like Notre Dame, especially a team that does not have quick strike capabilities, is you cannot get down big early, and we did exactly that. I don't think we played bad, but it never, even when it was 14-7, it never felt within
It didn't
reach
feel close
anymore, because you just cannot.
The game felt close was when Book threw that interception.
Yeah, and that was a brutal throw, a bad throw by Book.
Yeah, because they're yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was, you just obviously when you're trying to beat an elite team like that, you can't afford those mistakes. I think more disappointing though, at least in my mind, was we seemed so tentative the whole game. I mean, I don't remember if it was early on when we had a 3rd and 7 and we ran the ball with Book and he got like a yard.
I screamed at the TV on that. That was so ridiculous.
Yeah, and I don't profess to be as smart as Tommy Rees, but it's just like you scratch your head at some of the things we were doing. It never felt like we were testing Alabama on the offensive end, and I don't know. I've never liked getting the ball first, but I do believe as an underdog, especially if you're going to give up 14 quick points, like to not be getting the ball to start the second half, I think is a huge mental block. I didn't know, to be quite honest with you guys, why we were attempting a long field goal to end the half. Like, what is going down by 11 points do for you against a team that's most likely going to score a touchdown to start the second half?
On top of that, Jonathan Dorr I don't know what the hell happened to him.
He's been he's been a head case for the last 6 weeks. I mean, he can make a 55-yarder and he can miss a
20-some yarder. Yeah.
So I don't think we played bad. It was a relatively uninspiring performance, though, in my mind.
What I was going to say was it felt like we played to not get blown out. And that's what bothered me.
Yeah.
Let's play to win the game. Like, if we're playing to win the game, like Herm Edwards says, you play to win the game, I'd rather see them get blown out if they're taking chances. But what bothered me was, and especially in Kelly's postgame, was he said, oh, well, we didn't get destroyed. And it's like, well, you kind of played that way to not get destroyed, and that's what bothered me. I want to see them take chances. And it felt like that whole game until the last 10 minutes, they didn't take any chances. And it's like,
well, and you can argue to argue against both of your points that I don't think it would have been as close. I think Alabama kind of took their foot off the pedal a little bit, and to say that they got creative or took risks in the last 10 minutes, is that for pride's sake, or is that because Alabama? You remember in 2012 the quarterback and the linemen are fighting. They didn't care anymore about Notre Dame, that they were just getting into it with each other. And I completely agree with you though, that like, where's the play action bomb on the second play? Where's a flea flicker or hell something? And credit, yeah.
No, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say credit to Alabama. As much as I want to hate them, and you heard it from Saban after the game. They got him out of the pocket in a way that could contain him and didn't allow Book to do Book-like things, but it made him uncomfortable, and it didn't allow them to maybe. Unfortunately, a lot of those creative plays, the plays that maybe you haven't shown your hand throughout the season, it takes time. And even though our offensive line is really good at certain things, and I think they ran better now against Alabama this time than they have against other big games in the last 10 years. So that was the one shining spot I think I'd give Notre Dame for this game, is They look better at run blocking and running, and that credit to Williams on that. But they just didn't have the time pass blocking, and maybe that's something we can get into with Book, whether that's partly on Book, partly on Reeves or whatever. But yeah, they didn't take chances. They didn't get creative, and maybe that's partly on Kelly. I know that a lot of people out there would be screaming that is Kelly. That's why he's got to go and this and that and the other. But I also think that there is a stark contrast between Alabama, TASU, and Clemson and the talent levels that they have. This is not a fair sport. This is not even like English football, which Brett, I think, can appreciate the analogy there. This college football is probably one of the most unfair sports that exists. That has a major following. And
sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I wasn't going to touch on that. I was going to touch on something else. Go ahead and finish your.
No, I that's just going to open up a whole nother thing, and perhaps we can get into it some other time. It's just about the nature of where college football is at. And you, of course, if you're an Ohio State fan, you're a Bama fan, this is great. And if the cards were flipped and for whatever reason we had a $10 million coach and 5-star recruits out the ass and we were beating just the living shit out of every team, including, number 4s, number 5s, number 6s, maybe we wouldn't care as much. But I'd like to think that I like parity. I love the fact that the Columbus Crew won the title this year. They're not a New York. They're not a Los Angeles team. They don't spend millions. They're not doing the unfair things, and they still won.
That's also professional sports too.
Exactly. Exactly. And I know some people out there would say, what about the time Leicester City in England beat all of the millionaire sheiks? And
that's
it's a great story. I don't want college football to be a great story. My brother-in-law, my brother, and my dad and I all talked about this after the game. We need parity in college football. And if you saw the stat near the end of the game, they showed how many of the playoff games, the semifinal games, have not been close, have been 10 points or more.
Yeah.
Why is this good for the sport? Like,
well, I think part of what you're getting at is if they bring in one big thing I've always been about is the likeness and image. Okay, so say, I went down to OSU campus to party when I was in college, and we'd go by the bookstores and all that, and they'd have the jerseys in the windows, and it would say number 7. That's when Braxton Miller was there.
Yeah.
It's like, who that is. It's just doesn't have the name on the back of the jersey. So put the name on the jersey, give these kids 20% of the sales, and that's how they make their money. Like, yeah. I just don't. And if you do that, then guess what? I really think Notre Dame's going to have some damn good recruits because Notre Dame has a huge following. That's just where I'm at. You don't have to pay the players. Just let them make money off their image and likeness. I think everyone would be happy. That's just what I think.
Again, this is probably something we could do a whole couple of subjects on because there's a whole can of worms no matter what you do. If you pay them, there's a whole Title IX, there's lawsuits. What do you do with the kids who put in just as much time in smaller sports? But the same could be true as if, you let these kids who go to a few 10, 20 big schools who can make a little bit of money by selling their likeness in men's basketball. And no, and that's true. Like, I don't have a right answer. I don't know what it is. I know I'm going to feel bad because I knew athletes at Cincinnati, track and swimmers and guys and gals who put in hours of their time on top of being a student. Right. And for them, I can only imagine that they would turn around and see that these kids who already kind of live like prima donnas at some of these schools are now making money on it. Like, I don't know what the answer is, but it's complicated. It's hard. And either way, we're not doing any of that right now. It's these conferences that are getting filthy rich, and it's a few of these schools and their coaches that are getting rich. And it's getting less and less fun to watch. Maybe that's because I've been a Notre Dame fan and it's the misery of it all. But I don't know about you guys, but if this keeps happening, what is your motivation to continue hoping, to continue watching? Like, just to watch a nice 10 wins and we beat up on most of the schools that we should? Like, is that enough?
I don't know. I hopefully it turns around. I I think we should save that for another time.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm
We
sorry.
know it's all right. We just that's like you said, that's a wormhole we can go down through. The one thing on the Alabama game I wanted to touch on was Alabama's play calling against our defense. It felt like they were running, in my opinion, the same 5 to 10 plays. Either the bubble screen to the outside because we run that 4-3 defense, and I don't understand why more teams haven't done it all year because it puts the outside linebacker on the wide receiver.
Yeah.
And if you're going to the boundary, he's got to chase. And that's an easy, even if it's a Wusu Koromoa, that's an easy 5 yards every time, if not more. And then what they would do was we were running man to man, which don't get me started. I don't understand why we were playing man to man against that offense. But once they do that, and then, the outside receiver would block. But then the other times when you saw, what's his name, Devontae Smith hit those huge 50-yard gains, what they would do was he'd just run a slant instead of blocking. Same motion, everything.
Yeah.
He'd catch it, and then he's out in the open field, and there's no one in the middle of the field to tackle him. And it just felt like I was watching them do the most basic play calls and tear us apart, and it was driving me insane. But
yeah, I mean, it is.
When you have talent, man.
That's exactly right, Brett. And I think, Skinner, you hit the nail on the head about the difference between those top 3 teams and Bama, Clemson, Ohio State, and everybody else. And that's what Notre Dame didn't have. It's a fairly simple game at the end of the day. If you have guys that can run past the other team, you're going to be okay. I mean, I somehow mustered the strength to watch the Clemson Ohio State game despite being depressed. And you just watch on both those teams. They just have elite, what Dabo calls, quote, dudes on the offensive side of the ball. And Devontae Smith, the scary thing is Devontae Smith was not even their best. I mean, Jalen Waddle was hurt all year. It was supposed to be the number one. You have to have elite offensive playmakers, and it's not that complicated. To your point, Brett, they were not running complex plays, but they're getting Smith in space, and we don't have, back to how we kind of open this podcast, elite corners like a Patrick Surtain that can cover these guys. I mean, I love Kyle Hamilton, but he's not guarding the ball on most plays. So
center field guy.
Yeah, I mean, and again, this is probably a point for a whole nother podcast in terms of how Notre Dame bridges the gap. I think it's the wide receiver position and the cornerback position, but you need at least one 5-star as to each of those positions to bridge the gap, in my opinion.
Well, I think too that some of these simple plays, like it's an emotional game. These kids, they're still kids. They're 18 to 21 years old. You get in the hole, 14-0, 21-7, and all of a sudden those simple plays are not as simple to cover because your emotions have changed even just a little bit. That's where discipline comes in. And I'm not saying they're undisciplined. I think they've shown more and more as this decade has come along, and kudos to Kelly for some of the credit there, that they are more and more disciplined and won't let the game get ahead of them too much. But at the same time, it only takes a step, right? And so you get in the hole, and all of a sudden a play that you know how to cover 100 times this season, and you miss it, and it's that little edge, I guess, that people have. And Brett, you and I have talked about this even before Kelly. Notre Dame, I miss the days, and sometimes we'll have it against little cupcakes, but like I want to get out 14, 21-0, and then psychology them out of the game, right? It happens to us in these big games. I think if you go back and look at the box scores, I'm looking at the Bama game right now, like they got touchdowns on the first 3 drives, right? Like Notre Dame has to start showing up immediately in these games, and I don't know what that is.
When they get up 3 touchdowns, you totally, like Andy was saying earlier, you kill Notre Dame's way of playing. We're not a
no.
Well, I thought
you gotta run the ball, man. You know.
Yeah, and I thought it was fascinating. On the Shamrock podcast, they were talking about the box score. If you looked at the stats, were actually pretty similar in terms of like total yardage. The difference was that it took Notre Dame like 20 plays and it took Bama like 6. I mean, and that's where like the difference lies.
First 2 Bama drives, man.
7 plays, 5 plays, 6 plays, touchdown.
Think about it. If I had told you guys before that game that Bama only scores 31, and you realize that that's the least amount of points Bama has scored in 2 years, you think you feel pretty good. And even so, you look at, I mean, Devontae Smith had that absurdly wide open touchdown. I think it was maybe their second touchdown. I mean, Najee Harris has that like 55-yard run where he jumps over a guy. You think about these plays where it's like our defense isn't even showing up, but then at the end of the day, we had almost an elite defensive performance against one of the best offenses we've seen in the past decade. It's just our offense couldn't keep up. I mean, I don't know. So I'm speaking out kind of both sides of my mouth. As much as it seemed like we were overmatched, our defense, despite some of the wide open plays, we held our own.
All they could do, man. That's all you could ask for.
I mean,
if you've looked at these playoff games, if you're not scoring over 30 points, 35 points, you're not going to win.
No.
College football's about scoring points now. You can have a great defense, but a great defense is not going to win you a national title in college football anymore. It's going to be a great offense with a decent to a good defense, is what I've noticed at least.
And I think we've, Andy, to your point, we've seen the other side of it too, where we had the offense to keep pace. Not to again hash on this not having both at the same time thing, but what comes to mind is that Ohio State game in 2015, where partly because Jalen Smith gets hurt right away, but I remember Will Fuller scoring touchdowns late in the game, and we had the offense of firepower. We just didn't have the defense to get with it. And again, I'm going to keep probably harping on that because maybe that's the difference, is the depth that these few elite teams have on both sides of the ball. And don't get me started on special teams, because if this podcast keeps going, I despise I've texted both of you guys all the time how much I despise our special teams coordinator, and why they still made him out to be decent on NBC is beyond me. Yeah. He is the worst special teams coordinator.
All right, let's move on to the season. Do you guys think the last two games of the season made the season not a success, or was the season still a success in your eyes?
It sours it for sure. I mean, there's no other way to say it. You gotta win the last game of the season in American sports, because that's how you win a title. And I don't know. I'm glad we didn't win the ACC title, but then still got kind of our ass beat in the playoffs, because then I don't want Notre Dame fans to start being like, well, we got a conference championship. I don't want to start being that team.
I would have been devastated if they would have won the ACC championship, and I would have been like, yeah, dude, we can do it. And then that happened in the playoff. I would have kind of like thank you to them for tampering my expectations.
Thanks, Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah, thank you.
But I do think it was I mean, obviously soured it, but I don't think it takes away beyond the yucky feeling that we're going to have until next September. I think it was a hell of a season. I mean, making it to the playoff for a second time, which only a few teams have done. We lost to the two best programs in the sport over the last decade. We beat one of those teams once, and I know Notre Dame haters are on this podcast right now, so I don't feel the need to apologize for Trevor Lawrence not playing. Trevor Lawrence, play or not playing, we're winning that game in South Bend. That team, the way that we played that game, I wish that's the thing that makes the way we lost Alabama more heartbreaking in my mind. We just did not have the same moxie in either of those last two games that we did when we played Clemson and South Bend. And maybe that's some of the home field that you get with it. But all things considered,
I held the point they didn't play to win. At least that's what I think.
No. But yeah, I think a successful season, and it's very clear to me that we are the fourth best team. It's also even more clear to me that we're really we're still kind of light years away from being one of the top three. And I think that begins and ends. I texted Skinner the next day that begins and ends with getting talent. I mean, recruiting, and I don't know how you do it. Whether it's you spend more money on your recruiting personnel, or you get somebody who's just better with convincing 17 and 18-year-olds to come to South Bend. I don't know how you do it, but I think that's where it's got to start.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I think, at least in my point of view, I was texting Skinner during the Syracuse game. I saw the writing on the wall. during the Syracuse game, that first half. That first half, watching that game, I was like, man, maybe we're not as good as I think we are. And they got it together and they came back and won. But that Syracuse game really put it in my mind that the doubt that we weren't as good as I thought we were. And
Yeah.
I still think, like you said, we were the number 4 team, hands down. I don't think there was any argument about that. But yeah, I agree with everything Andy said. We just were the talent, the skill positions, and I know Andy's probably not going to want to hear this, but I think we're an elite quarterback away too. I think Ian Book was really good, but I don't think he's elite, and I think that's something that's holding us back too. And yeah, that's where I'm at.
So, and I'm sure we can. You had to talk about Book next, so I'm sure we can bring that up. But I did, I guess, want to caveat my sourness of the end of the season with Andy. I mean, you're absolutely right. Like, I'm going to remember in years to come the Clemson game. Partly just missing the third quarter, driving back from the city, which is the quarter we let them back into the game. But like, just going out in the street, it also felt good to beat the number 1 team for the first time since '93. But also in the year that we had last year, I just went outside in the street, started screaming, and then called my buddy over, and we just got drunk and walked around town because we couldn't do anything else. Can't go to the bars, couldn't do anything, and it just
COVID
felt
celebration.
good. Yeah, and I'll remember that. And maybe we beat them anyway. I don't think it was Trevor Lawrence as much as it was their defensive guys who were out for that game. But yeah, we took a chance, and I'm gonna remember the North Carolina game too. The solid defense after the first 2 drives for North Carolina. Like, he gave us all kinds of praise after the game. What's his name? Can see his face.
Mac Brown.
Mac Brown. Thank you. I was like, Texas guy. I'll remember the good things from this season and try not to get bitter about the end, because that's what I've had to train myself to do since '93.
Yeah.
And that Clemson game's right up there. But I think whether we're number 4, I think we're definitely in that second tier overall, not just for this season. We're with some of the other teams who float in and out. A&M came up this year, but they're not consistently there. There's the Florida team. There's a couple other teams. LSU obviously won the title, but they had kind of a fluke year. I think we're right there in that 4 through 10 spot.
Yeah.
But like you said, there is a large gap that exists between us and the next 3.
It's funny because on one hand it's large, and on the other, I think it's I think it's a 4 or a 5-star. A couple of those guys.
A couple of them, yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
you need, and to your point, Skinner, I think it's a great one. You need them on both sides of the ball
Yep.
at the same time. And
it's not just like you were saying. We need that one receiver at one corner, and I agree with you. Like, we need the Will Fuller, the Jeff Samardzija. We need the Vontez Duff type guy. But like, I remember a couple years ago, we didn't have enough guys in the front 7 of the defense, and now he put his emphasis on that. And then it's just putting all the pieces together. And I know it's easy to blame coaching or recruiting. It's probably really hard to get all that elite talent when you're not those top 3. Even if you are Brian Kelly and you have a good support staff and you've convinced the university to kind of bend a little bit for you, there's enough talent out there, I think, to build good football programs. But the top 50 guys, that top talent, that is a lot harder for the Notre Dames and Stanfords. I know people will hate that out there, but there is still a little bit of a difference in the standards from the university side. And I don't think that's the only hurdle, but I think that is still a hurdle for this team to get some of those guys. And maybe it's also a culture shock for some of those guys. Even if they could bend the rules for them, are they going to want to go through all that when maybe they're just looking beyond college at the next level? So,
that'll take us to Ian Book. I'll start this one off. Andy's probably not going to like what I have to say, but
it wouldn't be fun if we agreed on everything.
Right. I will start out with saying this is not a knock on the dude. The dude's a great guy, and what he did for Notre Dame is immense.
Yeah.
I don't hate him by any means, but I felt like his time at Notre Dame, I think he peaked at Clemson. When the Clemson game, when I saw him play that way, I was like, damn, dude, maybe this is the time he's taking that step. And I do agree with you on our weapons on the outside. They're not there. Um, but I think some of it falls on him too. Uh, he's a great quarterback who will be a legend at Notre Dame forever. Do I put him in the same category as Brady Quinn or even Jimmy Clausen as a quarterback? I'm not talking about what he did for the university, but as a quarterback, I wouldn't. No, I wouldn't. But um, I think he's got happy feet, and that's just the player he is. I get that, but there are times when I've seen people open and he's running around. I get that's who he is, but that's why I said I think Jack Coan's going to be a better fit for this offense because I think he's just going to get the ball. I don't know, and I've always been the kind of guy that likes a quarterback that gets the ball to the playmakers and isn't trying to do too much. Like if you're going to have a playmaker kind of guy, like give me a Vince Young who's just a freak of an athlete. That's who I want. But I know they don't come around all the time.
Yeah.
But I'll always appreciate Ian Book. Do I think he's an amazing quarterback? No, I don't. And I guess that's kind of where I'll just leave it at.
I'll allow you to directly respond first, Andy.
So to be clear, I 1,000,000% agree with you that in terms of pure quarterback abilities, Ian Book is not Brady Quinn, Jimmy Clausen, Deshaun Kaiser, maybe not even the guy he replaced in Brandon Wimbush in terms of pure arm strength.
Yeah, but he was better at reading defenses than Wimbush.
Yeah, no doubt. I think it's maybe a chicken or the egg problem in terms of the lack of resources he had around him this year. What was his final? Did he have 2 picks this year? 3, maybe. I mean, he didn't.
I'll check right now.
Well, he had 1 in the Alabama game. I think he had 2 or 3 coming into that game. So
okay, maybe it was more.
3. He had 3 total interceptions for 2020.
I mean, he didn't.
64% completion, 2,800 yards, 15 touchdowns.
And honestly, beyond all else, yeah, no doubt. And I hope he does well in the NFL. It kind of surprises me. He's an NFL talent because I don't. The dude just wins, though. I mean, he's got one of those kind of intangible characteristics that I loved about him that I always felt like he was going to make plays. I mean, he did it. He put us on our back in the Virginia Tech game last year. He looked out of this world against Carolina at parts of that Carolina game this year. And the dude just wins. And I really wish we had playmakers on the outside to see how much better of a quarterback he could have even been. Because I remember in the last few years, the guy can throw the ball downfield. I mean, he had a beautiful strike to Boykin to win the Pitt game at home last year. I don't remember which game it was when he threw like a 65-yard bomb to Lenzy, who was streaking down the sidelines. We just never. I don't know if it was we didn't try to take chances or we didn't dial up the plays for him to do that. It never felt like we were willing to give him a chance to throw the ball vertically. And maybe it was because we didn't have the receivers to do it. So I love Ian Book, one of my favorite all-time Notre Dame players, honestly, and what he's been through and what he did for that school. And I'm not going to fence with you that he lacks maybe the quarterback talent that some of the other quarterbacks we've had over the last 15 years have had. But I also think the weapons he had around him at the receiver position were a lot less than the guys like Kaiser and Brady and Jimmy Clausen had. So maybe it's no easy answer one way or the other, but I think there was a Notre Dame buddy of mine that I worked with, and last year the conversation was, do you play Book or Jurkovic? And he and I fought all day long about this, and I still very much support Kelly's decision to play Book over him. And I don't think Phil Jurkovic or really anybody else does any better with this Notre Dame team than Ian Book did.
I can agree with that. I don't think we win more games with a different quarterback. No. I just think the passing game might be a little better. And that's not a knock on him. But I guess the point of view I'm looking at it from is like Skinner was saying, the top three is he going to lead us to a national championship? No, he's not. And that's just my opinion. I don't, even with more weapons, do I think he'd lead us to a national championship? I don't. And I think that's the one big thing we're missing is that elite quarterback. And I pray to God that Tyler Buckner or Buck, I think that's his name, is that guy, because I think that's what we're really missing is a QB and the weapons on the outside and cornerbacks. And if we get that, I really think we have the talent to compete with anybody.
So I'll respond to each of you and then I guess give my impression of Book for the long term. But I agree. I think Andy, you were the one saying that the chicken and the egg. I think a different sort of chicken and the egg thing with we have seen him throw downfield sometimes. That were like these beautiful strikes. And then I've seen these like ducks, like Denard Robinson threw at Michigan sometimes. And the thing that's hard is if you don't practice it enough, if you don't do it enough in games, you're not going to be good at it. So was that Kelly and Rees kind of, or even before Rees, whoever, I can't remember who it was last year,
Chip Long.
just Chip Long, yeah, holding him back, or was it really that they knew that he couldn't do this consistently enough and not to do it, or even the cameras, even us who know football and can watch some of the replays, sometimes it doesn't do it justice that he threw it exactly where it needed to go, and you didn't have the receiver who knew exactly how to hold up. I mean, a back shoulder throw is as much the quarterback as it is the receiver, right? And same for some of these long balls. So I think it is a little column A, a little column B. They didn't do it enough, and he showed moments where he could have had that vertical ability, but maybe the talent wasn't there on his side or on the receiving side. In terms of like his legacy, I think it speaks for itself, right? I mean, he's put up there with Ron Paulus, which is funny in so many ways to me, but like Brady Quinn, I think everyone except Johnny Lujack, because the guy literally didn't lose. He tied a couple back in the 40s. Like, this guy is gonna leave a mark forever at Notre Dame, the school that only remembers the history books, right? So I think his legacy, I agree with you, Andy. I'm gonna remember him fondly as the person who, it could have been worse. We could have had a couple more 7-5 to 9-3 seasons with someone else. And I also agree with you, Brett, though. I don't think that putting someone else in there was gonna to change that last couple wins or anything. So
yeah, and I think that's a good point. I guess the question I would ask, and I agree with you, Brett, that to win a national championship, we need someone better. But I guess the flip side of that would be to ask, what game did Ian Book lose over the last 3.5 years that you think we would have won with a different quarterback?
That's not my gripe about him.
Yeah.
My gripe is, what game did I feel like he went out and won? That he was the catalyst for them winning. You could say the Virginia Tech game last year, but my counterpoint to that would be, well, they wouldn't have been in that position if he would have played better in that game.
Same with Clemson this year. He fumbled, yeah.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't even put the Clemson game on. That was just unlucky. He played his Clemson game was the best game I've ever seen Ian Book play, and that's what was so. Watching him play that game, I was like, man. And that's kind of what I want to get into in the next subject with Kelly is, with him, you saw these flashes of this quarterback, and I was like, damn, that's the guy I want. You know what I mean? And
yeah.
Does that fall on coaching? Because I guess I'll transition this into Kelly. The one big thing I think that Notre Dame's been lacking since Kelly's been at ND is an elite quarterback. But he's had the recruits. I'd probably say the best quarterback in Kelly's time here, in a quarterback standpoint, in my opinion, has been Deshaun Kaiser, who can do, throwing and running and whatnot. Or Ian Book, one of those two.
I agree with Kaiser. Yeah.
Is that on Kelly developing these quarterbacks, or is it just the lack of talent Because you look at like Everett
Yeah.
Golson. Everett Golson had a cannon of an arm. That guy
Yeah.
had all the intangibles to be a great quarterback. Yet he maybe was kind of a shithead, but was he developed correctly? And you could say the same thing with Ian Book. Skinner, you know this. When Bush was quarterback, I was calling for Ian Book to come in and be the quarterback.
Yeah.
Way early on in the season, and it's because I saw things in Book that he was a quarterback. But if you look at Ian Book's first start to where he ended up, did he really progress as much as he should have? And I don't think that's all on him. I think a lot of that comes on coaching with Kelly or
Right.
whoever is developing the quarterback.
Well, and I've texted both of you this, and I might have actually taken the text that you sent me, Brett, and then forwarded it on to Andy. Was that I think it speaks. It has to speak to the coaching that we've. Kaiser's next year was the worst year under Kelly, right? That you can say that they had a lot of close games, but that 4-8 campaign was just awful, right?
Well, I can't
And
believe that, yeah.
and Golson also, like you said, seemed maybe he had other things going on clearly, but like if people aren't, I'm not saying they always have to improve. If you get an elite guy, maybe he at his peak, at least keep him there. And sometimes that's difficult to do. But there seems to be a talent regression at some of the key positions. And is that partly on Kelly? I mean, if it's not directly on Kelly, then it's on the coach, which is then on Kelly to replace the coach. That's my biggest gripe on the special teams.
Yeah.
Replace the guy. He's under you. He's your responsibility, right? And so I think, at least partially, that's my biggest gripe on Kelly. I'm not a big like fire Kelly proponent necessarily, but I do think that, and hopefully he realizes if he is an elite coach that people are regressing under him. Why? Like, answer that question as a coach.
Yeah, I'm not. I am definitely not even close to being in the camp of fire Kelly.
Right.
I know we all want to get to that next level, but there's no question that this is the best period of Notre Dame football we've had in our
since '93.
Our lives,
since our lives. I mean, we all lived through, when we were freshmen going 0-7, and we like flashed glimpses of going to the BCS games against Oregon State and then Ohio State in 2005. Brady Quinn was a generational quarterback, but like we are consistently beyond the 4-8 season. We've been right there, knocking on the door. And the one thing Kelly needs to do a better job at, like I said earlier, and I'm not smart enough to know how you do it, he's got to do a better job recruiting. And part of me wonders if like Brian Kelly's personality like just doesn't jive with some of these young kids. I mean, you look at the top coaches, Nick Saban is different because and unfortunately for all of us, his track record now speaks for itself, that he can go into a household and say, you're going to go to the NFL and you're probably going to win a national championship. And so that kind of dictatorial style like works for him because he just has the street cred. Kelly, Kelly does not have that street cred. And yet at the same time, he doesn't seem to have the relationship with his players like a Dabo does or like a Ryan Day does.
I will say it's got better over the past few years.
And it got better after he went 4-8. He calmed down a lot. He made a concerted effort to like relax. But I mean, we all saw, I think it was probably the South Florida game that we were talking about to open this podcast. And his routine, depancing of players has gotten better, which I'm glad. But this is not a knock on him, but I'm just kind of questioning whether Brian Kelly has the ability to recruit, even all other things being equal, to recruit with like a Dabo or a Ryan Day or a Nick Saban. I don't know. I think that's what he's got to figure out.
Do you think though that he also, once he gets, because he is still getting talent, let's not mistake that Notre Dame's still getting a lot of 4-star recruits and 3-star recruits, right? The talent that he is getting, especially in some of the key positions that he would have more of a hands-on, do you think that there has been at times some regression, or is that just cherry picking?
I think that's fair. No, I think that's fair.
I will
I mean,
say
how,
one thing with recruiting, getting Tommy Reese and Marcus Freeman now, these young coordinators, I think that's really going to help energize recruiting some. Uh, that's just my opinion on that.
I think so. Yeah,
Hope
definitely.
so.
And I don't. Yeah, I mean, Skinner, to your point, I think it's really well taken about the regression. I mean, you go 4-8 with that team. There's no. I'll be surprised if you can find me a football team that's been more disappointing than that. I mean, that 2016 team, was it 16 when we went 4-8? They had NFL talent all over. I mean, Deshaun Kaiser is an NFL quarterback. We had NFL talent all over the offensive line. So you definitely got to put that a little bit on coaching. I'm still definitely in the camp of being way more appreciative and thankful for the success that Kelly's breeded. But I think your criticism is fair, and it's something that he's got to figure out.
But we're also looking at the past too, and just I will say the development of the offensive line and the front seven of the defense has been so much better than it was years ago. I think just you're looking at cornerback, and I wouldn't even critique wide receiver because we had Chase Claypool the year before. I just don't think we had the talent this year at wide receiver.
Yeah.
Because Chase Claypool was what, a 3 or a 4-star, and look what he developed into. Still shocked he went that late in the draft because that dude is a freak. But yeah, I just think it's like Andy said, a lot of it falls on recruiting, and hopefully these young coordinators can do that. And if you look at the draft, or not the draft, the recruiting for 2020 class, in my opinion, it's probably the most well-rounded class he's had maybe in his whole time at Notre Dame. So hopefully that's a good sign.
Do you guys think that when it comes to recruiting, obviously we've talked at length about the importance of each position. I think we've gone through most of them, and we put certain emphasis at certain times in the last 2 decades on O-line, D-line, linebackers, and skill positions, etc. But like if you had to rank them, you had to prioritize them at the end of the day, right? I think rightfully, after some of the debacles in the early part of this decade, D-line is clearly something that you need the raw talent. So I would rank that higher. Like receivers, to me, I'm not saying that you guys are wrong. We definitely need to get better talent at receiver, but like that's something that seems to be more moldable from the talent that you do get than something that just like a corner or a D-line. And with O-line, you really need the size. You need some skill too and a good coach. But like, what I mean? Like, how would you rank them? I wouldn't put receiver at the highest priority of getting the 5. If you had only 5 stars that you could get, where you would put them, I think I would still load up on D-line first with like 2, maybe a corner and a quarterback and a running back. Like that would be my 5. You know what I mean?
I'd go lines, both offensive and defensive line, and then probably quarterback. And then I think those are the 3 most important things you got to have. But I think you have to have someone that can challenge a defense vertically in college football, because if you don't, teams can just load up within 20 yards and shut you down. So you have to have someone that can challenge a team vertically, or you're ripping out half of a playbook and you're pretty much neutering your offense. Just my opinion.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I guess my comment may be a little unfair because I'm talking from the lens of what Notre Dame needs to compete with the next teams. I mean, we have a embarrassment of riches, honestly, on this team everywhere else. I will grant you that Ian Book is not elite, but he was in my mind, a great quarterback. We had elite talent on the O and D lines, the linebacker position, the safety position, the tight end position, the running back position. I'm more saying in terms of what we need, assuming all other things remain equal for the talent that we've had at the other positions. But yeah, no, I definitely agree with you that the receiving core can be molded more by a coach, and I think sheer size and speed can on the O and the D lines. No doubt about it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's move on to our predictions for next year. What do you guys think Hal will do next year? Who will be a surprise player, and who would be your pick for offensive and defensive MVP?
I don't have the schedule up in front of me. I think we're going to take a step back. I definitely don't see us returning to the playoff. Without the benefit of the schedule in front of me, I do know that we play UC at home. I know we play VTech, Virginia. We open in Tallahassee. We play Wisconsin, Soldier Field. I'll say 9-3. Defensive Player of the Year, Kyle Hamilton. Offensive Player of the Year, either Mike Mayer or Kyron Williams. And honestly, I think the thing I'm most excited to see next year, on the topic of the day, is the development of our wide receivers. I mean, Kevin Austin has been a name we seemingly have been hearing about for a decade and haven't gotten to see the guy play. So hopefully he can lace up. Jordan Johnson didn't get any playing time this year, but should be playing next year. So I'm excited to see what some elite players on the perimeter can do, along with a transfer quarterback who's got veteran experience. And 9-3 may be a tad pessimistic. I just rebuilding and replacing as much as we lost this year. I think we have 4 starters coming back on the offensive side of the ball. I think it's going to be tough to replicate what we did this year.
I would say that it would sound optimistic, but looking at the schedule, I mean, 9-3. I'm half tempted to say 10-2. The schedule looks very
reasonable,
man. The only 2 losses I can see us having, or maybe would be Cincinnati or Wisconsin, or maybe USC. Because North Carolina is losing a bunch of talent.
Yeah, North Carolina won't be a threat next year.
Yeah, and then but yeah, I agree with everything you said. I mean, even if we go 10-2 next year, it's going to be a rebuilding year.
10-2 though should put you in a New Year's Six game, and maybe we can win one of these GD games. I mean,
who knows? These kind of years like this, sometimes are the years where the team shocks you and they come out and they show something you don't even know. Like, I'm trying to think of a year that we had like this. 2018? I don't think anyone expected us to go 12-0.
No, definitely not. I didn't.
They came out and did that, and I don't know.
But my offensive MVP will probably be
I'll go with Kyron, and defensive MVP, I'm gonna go with Drew White. So
yeah, I'll just run through them real quick. At Florida State, Toledo, Purdue, Wisconsin, Soldier Field, Cincinnati, at Virginia Tech, Southern Cal, North Carolina, Navy, at Virginia, Georgia Tech, at Stanford. So with a bye week, it looks like before Southern Cal. We always get the bye week before Southern Cal when it's when Southern Cal's at home.
Beat that ass.
Well, they were the ones who, traditionally we ended the season with them way back when, and they were tired of, I think in the 50s, of coming into the cold weather.
Yeah.
So they were like, let's move your game to October. No, I think I echo a lot of what you guys are saying. I'm going to be most interested in to see the redevelopment of the offensive line, and how successful that is will determine how successful our running game is. And I think we're going to still need that running game, no matter what. That Florida State game is going to be tough because we're going to be developing a lot and learning a lot with new people. So honestly, that's one that scares me. So I think because of that, I think I could see more of a 9-3, because I agree with you, Brett. I think I'm looking at most of the rest of the schedule, like 2 somewhere in there. I really hope it's not Cincinnati, because I don't want to deal with my asshole friends.
I could not deal with that.
Right. So, and I don't know much about Wisconsin. I don't think anyone does. Their weird year. Everyone had a weird year, but they had a very weird year. And then Southern Cal just has some raw talent. So I'll say, 9.5 and 2.5 somewhere in there. And if the offensive line really can continue its consistency, I'll agree. Kyron as the MVP of the offense. I don't know enough about who's coming back on the front seven. You said Owen Deje and Owusu-Koroma are gone. Who else is gone in that front seven?
I know Kurt Heinisch is coming back. I don't know about Tua's cousin. I can't think of his name right now.
Okay.
Leah Fowl will be back. I think Drew White's coming back. You got Kyle Hamilton. Isaiah Pryor is going to be taking Owusu-Koromoa's spot.
Okay. Dalen Hayes.
Sean Crawford.
He's gone.
Sean Crawford, after his 3-decade stint at Notre Dame, is finally done. Actually,
Love
could
that
he
guy.
come
What
back
a
this year
trooper.
with the COVID rules? Could he come back?
No, that'd be a 7th year. I think he's already got his medical registered. Poor kid.
Yeah.
Man. Yeah, I guess without knowing a whole lot of the front seven, I agree with you, Andy, that Kyle Hamilton might have a breakout year for the secondary. And one final note on the next year that maybe it's just more of a hope. I'm not just joking, we really have let go of our special teams under Kelly, in my opinion, because like you were saying earlier, Brett, you got to take risks to win big games. And sometimes that's the kicking, sure, when to kick and when not to kick depends on your kicker, which wasn't consistent this year. But we don't put enough effort into return games. And a
We're
few
good
of the
at
schools,
blocking punts, but we suck at returning punts.
oh, awful.
When was the last time we had a meaningful punt or kick return? I honestly can't remember.
Zibikowski against USC.
Oh
No,
my God,
I mean, a meaningful one, sure. We've had
great memories of
we've
my
had
Notre Dame
touchdown.
champion.
I remember the Pitt game where we ended up losing it. I remember that was Herb Street was announcing it, but we had a punt return for a touchdown. Was that what's his name, Fuller, I think. But I'm just saying, I really hope that Polian pulls his head out of his ass and decides to take some risks, or Kelly tells him to do that, because we're not three-dimensional in terms of the three sides of the ball here. And I
agree with you,
really,
but I think part of it falls on Kelly, because I think Kelly, the way he looks at it is just get the ball and give the offense the ball. He doesn't want any screw ups on special teams.
He's conservative. Exactly.
Yeah.
His for years has been bend but don't break. That works against a lot of teams. It does not work against some of the elite teams, right?
When's the last time we had a punt returner back there where you're like, "Oh, watch out"? You know, it's always
the fact that my brother-in-law, full of all his wit. I mean, how many times his football team name has been the Fair Catch Goodmans? You guys remember Goodman?
Yeah.
Hey, he didn't drop any. I'll tell you that.
Same with what was his name this year? He was I will give him some credit. There were a few times where he didn't fair catch it, but you knew he wasn't going to get it any more than 10 yards.
Well, it's because of the protectors, which that's on coaching. The guys who have to block the gunners. They, even if we're not in punt safe, because hey, it's 4th and 15, so we can actually try to set up a return. Hardly ever is it set up.
I will say, Skinner, you reading through our schedule, we should be favored in probably all of those games. So I think next year we're going to lose a couple that we shouldn't, and I hope I'm wrong, and I don't really have a firm, concrete reason for that. I don't know. It seems like we're due for a season of a couple of those losses that we shouldn't have.
Let me ask you guys this, though. And obviously, as diehard fans, we never want our team to lose. I don't even have to ask this question. We'd rather go undefeated and get blown out again in a playoff. But at the same time, there's a little part of you, right, that's saying, if we are favored in all these games, do we really want to go 12-0 and get embarrassed versus, a nice... We finally won a January game against LSU a couple years ago, but you're right. Like, getting one of the big six bowls under our belt, a solid 11-2 season, would almost be like a better way to end for one of these years than just another embarrassment or heartbreart. You know what I mean? I'm not saying I want it. I wouldn't root for it, but I would feel good.
I'll get my ass kicked as many times as it takes to. That's just the way
that hurts you in the long run with the committee. The committee
too,
and they will remember. They punished other teams in the past, in the BCS era and the playoff era, for embarrassments. So it's not completely like valueless to take that into consideration.
That's true.
I hear what you're saying, but I'm firmly in the camp of I'd rather go and have the hope of winning one of those games. And the unique thing about the sport of college football is that you can win a bowl game, be it a New Year's Six game or the Citrus Bowl when we beat LSU. I mean, yeah,
Right.
I felt better.
Right.
But like at the end of the day, like what? I mean, that
Didn't mean anything.
No, and I don't want to ever be of the mindset that bowl games are meaningless, because I don't think they should be, and that's a problem with the playoff. I think in general that everything else is
Right.
relegated to anonymity. But at the same time, 100 out of 100 times I would prefer to be in the playoff and get my ass kicked than win a game that, I don't know.
100%.
I think it meant more winning that Citrus Bowl because we beat an SEC team in LSU. If it would have, like, what about the Iowa State game the other year? Like, I didn't give a shit.
What about 2013? We beat Rutgers at Yankee Stadium.
I didn't care. I was like,
Right.
oh, great. We beat Iowa State. Well,
Right.
after watching this year, you look back on it and you're like, wow, actually wasn't a bad win. But still, at
Right.
the time, I was like, I don't care. So,
And that's
No,
the
I-
thing about
yeah.
the thing about sports, though. I mean, the game itself, at least for me, I don't know about you guys, is always fun, but it takes a back seat to the anticipation leading up to the game. I mean, that whole week in between Christmas and New Year's, I'm sure you guys, I was reading and listening to the entire internet, getting pumped for the game, and you just, regardless of whether you actually have a chance or not, the hope and the dream of winning a game like that, in my mind, trumps everything else, even if it usually doesn't end up working out for you. And I think I'll take that any day of the week. And hopefully one of these years that hope turns into something concrete and we actually get the job done.
Yeah. No, and I want to set the record for anyone that they aren't gonna call me out as being somebody who wants the latter. I definitely would agree with you guys. I would rather be in
Your
the
point's taken.
playoff.
I heard that from a lot of people. I mean, that seemed to be your question's a good one, though, because it seemed like it was a question that, especially the way we lost the ACC championship, it seemed like a question a lot of Notre Dame fans were asking, is like, do we really want this? And it seems like we're all in agreement. I personally think, yeah.
Right.
So, all right, let's do this real quick and then we'll wrap it up. Predictions for the national championship. Who do you got in your score?
I don't think I'll watch. I hate both teams so much. I honestly am trying to think of who I to win, because you know me, love the history, and I'm so pissed at Bama for counting a bunch of titles that they don't deserve.
Yeah.
But they probably legitimately have more actual titles than we do now. So with that, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I might actually want Tasu to win just to stop Bama from getting more.
No.
But I have for an actual prediction, I don't know. Ohio State surprised me with the semi game. I think it'll be close, and I think it'll be high scoring. I don't know.
Yeah.
In the 30s, and I hope Ohio State wins. Oh.
I'm with Skinner. I think it's going to be a close game. I think it's going to be a high scoring game. I think Bama has more offensive firepower and is going to outlast them. I think Bama 42-35, but it'll be close. I mean, Ohio State's got some elite talent on the offensive side of the ball, and making all the haters who said they didn't play enough games look awfully silly right about now.
Yeah.
But
I'm with you, Andy. I'm like same boat. I think it'll be like, I think I'll say this: if Ohio State plays the way they did against Clemson, they can beat anybody. That they played out of their damn mind game. That was incredible. But I think more of that was based on like, the talk, their history against Clemson, never beating them, redemption from the year before, a lot of motivation.
Yep.
Yeah,
that is what.
Oh, sorry.
That is one thing, and I know we're running out of time here. I'd be interested in your guys' thoughts on that I wish Brian Kelly would do in terms of this revenge aspect. I don't know if you guys watched College Game Day before the playoff games, but they kept showing clips of Ohio State in the offseason, and Ryan Day hung up like all over the facility the score of last year's semifinal game.
Right.
And I wish, and maybe Kelly does, but I wish he would do something like that, like hang up ACC title and the Bama scores all over the Goog and have these guys start wanting it. Because I mean, there was like no doubt after watching that Ohio State Clemson game that those guys wanted that. And frankly, they may have wanted that even more than they care about winning the title game, getting another shot at Clemson. But that was because Ryan Day made it a point to instill that within the team. And hopefully Kelly can do something like that, use some inspiration to get the guys fired up.
I'm with you 100%.
Yeah. I said it earlier. This is an emotional sport. If one of the worst things about it is it's unfair and it's all about the money, even though they say it's not, one of the best things is it's more emotional than any professional sport, right? These are kids.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. When you're dealing with kids.
Yeah, you can beat anybody and you can lose anybody. That's why I never do my old roommate, John, and I, he's a Michigan guy. We always joke about the transitive law of football because it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't matter that so-and-so beat so-and-so beat so-and-so. Like, it doesn't matter. I mean, Bama could have, I remember one game they were with an FCS opponent and it was close until halftime. And then Saban probably went in and lit a fire under their ass, right? So anyone, I think that's the beautiful aspect of it. And you're right, absolutely. Kelly at least doesn't appear to ever be using that hot-headedness in a good way of like revenge or motivation. I remember Charlie Weiss put up some stupid, or no, it wasn't. It was the other way around. Michigan put up something, or no, it was us. Remember, we got beat 38-0, and Charlie Weiss put up a bunch of the signs.
Yeah.
And we did like sets of 38 push-ups and this and that, and then they went down there and they big house, right? So absolutely, we need more of that.
I agree.
What's the word out of Columbus with the COVID situation?
That's what it's been like. There's rumors of it, but no one really knows. It's kind of up in the air. It's like NHL right now, where they won't release any details. But
yeah,
I think that's a big part of it too. Is how big is that COVID situation? Because
if your quarterback can't play, that I do feel for them. I also feel for Bama being like, is it just to delay it to get him to play? But even though Notre Dame got the regular season win against Clemson without Lawrence, I would want, as a college football fan, you'd want the best people on the field, and if that means
for the
delaying
national
it,
title,
yeah, absolutely,
title for sure, yeah. But yeah, I think that's a big part of it. But even, I'll say if there are COVID issues, I see Ohio State losing by 2 scores or more. If there aren't COVID issues, I don't know. I still think Bama is the better team at the end of the day. I would say Bama probably around, like, I was going to say 38-34 is what I was going to say Bama.
I think the one big intangible is we don't know as much about Ryan Day. I mean, I know he's been doing spectacular for his first couple of years, but you know what I mean? He's kind of new to the scene. Although he did great last week, but Saban could be the intangible, or maybe we find out that Ryan Day is the next, upper echelon coach.
Well, I think part of what Andy said earlier in the show was smartest. Bama didn't open up their bag of tricks against us, so they
didn't have to.
Yeah, they have a lot hidden away for this game, and I think you're gonna. And I've also heard that Jalen Waddle might play too, and if he plays,
not even fair.
Yeah. He obviously won't play the whole game, but you put him and Devontae Smith on the same field. And Ohio State's secondary has had issues this year, so that could be trouble. But yeah, that's just what I think.
For sure.
Yeah, but you guys want to add anything else before we wrap this up?
I guess I wanted to ask, because we are moving into the off season. I guess this is off the record now, or you can edit it out. But like, what was your idea for consistency? Like once a month for the off season, or?
Yeah, we can do once a month or like once every other week or something. It's up to you guys. It doesn't matter to me.
Because like I said, I'm just not as plugged in as I was as a freshman.
And there's not as much to talk about.
No.
Yeah, I think once a month for the off season is probably good, unless we get some late breaking news that will take up a whole show.
All right, cool. Yeah, here, I'll finish this up real quick. Make sure you guys subscribe, like the video, give us a review, or follow us on any podcast. I will include these guys' Twitters or anything like that they want in the description of the podcast or the video. Make sure you go and follow them. And yeah, thanks for joining us here. We'll be doing this once a month for the off season, and then when the season comes back, we'll be week to week. But thanks for joining us, guys.
Thanks for joining us. Go Irish.
Go Irish.
Go Irish. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. Oh, why'd he leave? No. Get back.
Oh,